What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved action legends walks straight into the lion's den of daytime television? You won't believe what unfolds when Harrison Ford, grizzled icon of the silver screen, sits down for what was supposed to be a routine promotional interview on The View, only to find himself ambushed in a verbal crossfire that ends in one of the most jaw-dropping exits in TV history. But before we break down this explosive moment, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because what you're about to see is nothing short of legendary. The studio lights burned hot as Harrison Ford eased into the familiar beige couch. At 78, with decades of interviews under his belt, Ford looked calm, hands clasped, face unreadable. This was supposed to be a straightforward appearance to promote his latest film. 20 minutes, a few laughs, and back on the road before New York traffic took over. But there was something different in the air that morning. Across from him, Whoopi Goldberg leaned back in her chair, that trademark smirk creeping in. To her side, Joy Behar shuffled her cards, brimming with anticipation. Sunny Hostin adjusted her glasses like a lawyer about to pounce, and Sarah N. wore her ever-pleasant, ever-neutral smile. Then it began. So, Harrison, Whoopi said casually to casually, "We're here to talk about your new movie. But we have to ask about your recent comments making headlines." She paused, letting the tension stretch. "You said Hollywood's being overtaken by what you called the woke agenda." Ford's jaw tightened. The temperature in the room dropped. "There's been a lot of misinterpretation," he replied, measured but firm. "I spoke about keeping storytelling authentic, not pushing agendas. That's all." Joy couldn't hold back. "But come on, Harrison. When you say stuff like that, it sounds like you're against representation. Are you saying inclusive stories aren't authentic?" Ford's face hardened. "That's not what I said. And honestly, it's exactly that kind of twisting that causes division. I believe in good stories, period. When you start with a message first, the story suffers." That's when Sunny leaned in, eyes sharp. "Easy to say when most stories have already been about you, isn't it?" she asked. "When people finally see themselves on screen, you call it an agenda. Sounds like you're uncomfortable sharing space." Ford's hands clenched. His voice dropped. "I've worked with talented people from every background," he said slowly, "and I don't need lectures on diversity from anyone in this room." The silence that followed was deafening. Whoopi raised her eyebrows. "Really?" she shot back. "Because last I checked, you made your career playing characters written for white men. You think we don't know what we're talking about?" For a moment, Ford said nothing. His legendary composure was visibly cracking. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every twitch, every shift, every second of tension. And this was just the beginning. "That's not what I meant, and you know it," Ford said, his voice dropping into that unmistakable low-register one that co-stars and moviegoers alike recognized from his most commanding roles. His tone was firm, his eyes locked in. "I'm talking about the craft of storytelling, not assumptions about anyone's qualifications or lived experience." But the hosts weren't backing off. They sensed a moment. The tension was palpable. And Sarah Haynes, ever the smiling sniper, struck with a question cloaked in innocence. "Harrison," she began sweetly, "what we're trying to understand is, do you believe stories told from different perspectives? Stories that center characters who haven't traditionally been Hollywood heroes are somehow less authentic or less valuable than the ones you've built your career on?" It was a masterclass in verbal cornering. Any answer would be scrutinized, twisted, magnified. It was a no-win question, and Ford knew it. His instincts screamed for restraint, but his frustration, fueled by what he saw as a deliberate distortion of his words, was already pushing him toward the edge. "Look," he said, his voice sharpening, his frame leaning forward, "I've spent 50 years in this industry. I know the difference between authentic storytelling and checkbox casting. When you prioritize identity over talent, everyone suffers, including the very communities you're claiming to uplift." Silence, the kind of dead air that producers dream of. Even the crew held their breath. The tension hit the room like a thunderclap. Whoopi's expression shifted. No longer amused, her voice dropped into a whisper laced with fury. "Did you just imply that diverse actors are less talented than white ones? Because that's what I heard, and I want to be very clear on what you're saying." Ford saw the trap too late, but pride overpowered caution. "That's not what I said," he fired back, now clearly agitated. "And the fact that you're twisting my words is exactly the problem. You can't have a real conversation about craft or quality without someone screaming racism the moment you disagree." The dam broke. All four co-hosts spoke at once, a wall of outrage crashing over him. Joy Behar's voice rose above the noise. "Honest conversation," she snapped. An honest conversation would include acknowledging that actors of color were shut out of opportunities for decades. But Ford wasn't retreating. His legendary tempered by years of press training finally boiled over. He straightened in his chair, jaw tight, neck veins visible. His voice cut through the chaos like a steel blade. "You want to talk exclusion?" he growled. "Let's talk about how you exclude honest debate by labeling anyone who doesn't parrot your narrative as a racist." Sonny Hostin leaned in, eyes narrowed, voice cold and precise. "Your narrative, Harrison? This isn't about spin. These are facts. Hollywood has a long-documented history of discrimination, and when people like you suggest that diversity equals mediocrity, you're just reinforcing that same discrimination." Ford laughed, but it was sharp, bitter. "People like me? You mean people who've been working in this industry since before you were born? People who've seen great actors passed over for political trends on both sides?" He stood his ground, defiant. "I've worked with some of the most talented actors alive, and their race never mattered. Their talent spoke for itself." Joy slapped the table. A loud crack echoed through the set. "Oh, please! That's the oldest line in the book. I don't see color. Maybe that's the problem, Harrison. Maybe you should, because the rest of us don't have the luxury of ignoring it. Not when we've spent decades watching a system that definitely saw color when deciding who got to be the hero and who got stuck playing the sidekick." The audience, once quietly murmuring, was now silent, captivated. This wasn't an interview anymore. It was a reckoning. Backstage, Ford's publicist frantically signaled to producers, but it was too late. The moment was already going viral. Ford leaned forward again. This time, quieter, more dangerous. "You want to know what's really toxic?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper, but razor sharp. "It's people like you who turn every discussion into a racial battle, who shut down any talk of quality with accusations and guilt. You've created a culture where it's impossible to speak honestly." Whoopi's face was now frozen in controlled fury, and the battle was far from over. She jabbed a finger toward Ford, her voice sharp and unwavering. "You want honesty? Fine. Here's honest. You're sitting there as a man who benefited from a system that favored you because of your race, your gender, and, now that others are finally getting a seat at the table, you're calling it unfair. That's not honest, Harrison. That's hypocritical." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. For a second, something dark flickered in Ford's eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and dangerous, the kind of cold fury that had made his villains unforgettable. "I earned every role I ever had. I auditioned, I delivered. Nothing was handed to me because of the color of my skin, and I won't sit here and let you reduce my entire career to a political soundbite." Sensing things were spiraling fast, Sarah Haynes leaned in, trying to soften the temperature. "Harrison, I think what we're all trying to say is this shift. In the industry, it's not about tearing anyone down. It's about finally creating space for stories and voices that were shut out for decades. That's a win for everyone, including the audience." But Ford was past reasoning. Decades of pent-up frustration with what he saw as political correctness gone mad boiled over. "Different perspectives," he snapped. "You mean the ones built on the assumption that anything successful must be rooted in oppression, that merit means nothing if you're the wrong color? That's not progress. That's just discrimination with new branding." The studio erupted again, but this time it felt personal. Sonny Hostin stood, her voice slicing through the chaos. "How dare you talk about discrimination? You've never been told you weren't right for a part because of your race. You've never had to be twice as good to be seen as half as worthy." Ford shot to his feet too, towering over the table, his presence unmistakably intimidating. "And you've never watched this industry become a political minefield where talent is shoved aside for optics, where great stories are sacrificed in the name of ideology." Joy Behar's voice spiked with fury. "Social justice? You mean justice, period. You mean finally giving opportunities to people who were locked out for decades. If that scares you, maybe you should ask yourself why. At this point, the illusion of civility was shattered. Personal attacks flew freely, and the typical Polish of daytime TV was gone. Ford's chest rose and fell with visible rage. The hosts, meanwhile, seemed invigorated. They'd cracked the facade of one of Hollywood's most respected icons. Then Whoopi delivered what was clearly meant as the death blow, her voice laced with venom. You know what this proves, Harrison? That we need more diversity, not less. Behind the camera, in front of it, because clearly some people would rather protect their privilege than push the industry forward. Ford's eyes narrowed. When he spoke again, it was with the cold finality of a man stepping over a line he knew he couldn't return from. My privilege, he said, voice clipped. Lady, I was earning my place in this business before you even knew what a camera was. 50 years, that's what I've given. I'm not going to let a panel of talk show hosts who've never created a damn thing tear it all down to score political points. The air in the studio thickened, heavy and still. Everyone knew something irreversible had just happened. The hosts' faces registered shock, fury and a kind of grim satisfaction. Ford had said the quiet part out loud, and he wasn't finished. Silence lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like forever. Then Whoopi rose. Slowly, deliberately, trembling with restrained rage. Talk show hosts who've never created anything, she repeated. I've got an Oscar on my shelf, Harrison. I've made more meaningful art in 1 year than you have in your whole career. Running around in a fedora playing the same man-child hero over and over again. The insult landed. Ford flushed crimson, his voice shaking with rage. Meaningful, sitting here every day spreading division, attacking guests who come in good faith to talk about their work. That's your contribution to entertainment. Joy wasn't holding back anymore. Good faith. You showed up with your victim complex and a pocket full of dog whistles. You can't handle the fact that Hollywood's finally evolving past old white men as the default. So you dress up your bitterness as concern for quality. That was it. Ford's restraint snapped like a brittle bone. Racist? You're calling me racist. I've worked with more diverse casts than any of you. I've mentored young actors. Of every background, I've never made a single choice based on race or gender. But I guess that's not enough anymore. He spat the last words like a curse. Not enough for you people. The phrase landed like a bomb. You people, Ford snapped. The phrase hit the studio like a grenade. The tension shattered. Suddenly, everyone was on their feet, voices erupting into a chaotic wall of outrage. Sunny Hostin's legal instincts took over. She pointed straight at Ford, eyes blazing. You people, did you really just say that to a table full of women, including women of color? Are you kidding me? This is exactly what we mean when we talk about the mask slipping the second you're challenged. Ford's face paled, but pride overruled regret. Don't twist my words, he shot back. I meant people who make everything about race and politics instead of the work. People who can't have a conversation without calling someone a bigot. Sarah Haynes, who'd tried to maintain some professionalism, now dropped the act. Your character is what's on display here, Harrison. And what we see is someone so threatened by inclusion. He sees it as an attack on his legacy when it's actually a long overdue correction to a broken system. Ford's voice thundered, forcing the sound crew to scramble on their dials. My legacy? I've entertained millions. I've created characters that inspired generations. And you want to burn that down because I won't worship at the altar? Of your politics, Whoopi didn't flinch. Her response was swift and cold. Nobody's tearing down your legacy, Harrison. You're doing that all by yourself right here, right now, in front of millions of viewers. You're showing us exactly who you are when you're not playing a script. The blow landed. For a split second, the fire left Ford's eyes, but something colder replaced it. When he spoke again, his voice was eerily calm. You're right. I am showing people who I am. I believe in merit over politics. I believe talent should matter more than demographics. I believe storytelling is an art, not a battleground for social agendas. And if that makes me the villain in your little narrative, so be it. Joy Behar leaned forward, her voice drenched in disdain. It doesn't make you a villain, Harrison. It makes you irrelevant, a relic of a system we're actively dismantling. And the fact that you can't see that just proves how badly it needed to change. Ford stood motionless, taking it all in, then with deliberate control, he reached for his lapel mic. The soft click, as he unclipped it, sounded like a gun cocking. "I've been in this business 50 years, he said quietly, now his calm, more unnerving than his anger. "I've worked with legends. I've made classics. I've earned the respect of my peers through hard work and professionalism. I don't need to be lectured by people who think entertainment is a weapon instead of a craft." He placed the mic gently on the coffee table. The gesture was small but seismic. "I came here to talk about my work, to share something I'm proud of. Instead, I walked into an ambush designed to make me a villain for daring to say that quality should matter more than quotas." Whoopi tried for the last word. "You weren't ambushed. You were asked reasonable questions. You doubled down on positions that a lot of people find deeply problematic." Ford laughed, dry and bitter. "Problematic. That's your word for anyone who doesn't agree with you." He turned for the exit, then paused. His final words cut like glass. "You want to know what's really killing this industry? It's not diversity. It's people like you who think tearing down success will somehow lift others up, who think every story has to be a statement instead of just something people love." Silence. Ford walked toward the studio doors. Each footstep felt like a drumbeat, the end of something old and the beginning of something uncontrollable at the threshold. He turned back, eyes sweeping the stunned table. "You got what you wanted," he said. "You got your moment. I hope it was worth it." He walked out. The door closed behind him with a heavy, echoing thud. The hosts sat frozen in the aftermath, breathless. The control room was chaos. Producers on the phone, interns crying, segment directors arguing over whether to cut or ride the shockwave. In the audience, total silence, no applause, no boos, just stunned realization something had happened, and nothing in Studio to 3B or daytime TV would ever be the same again.